Captain Ethan Walker had dedicated his entire life to serving his country. At 32 years old, he had already earned a reputation as one of the bravest and most disciplined officers in the Special Operations Unit. His fellow soldiers trusted him without hesitation, because Ethan never asked anyone to face a danger he wasn't willing to face himself. Whether rescuing civilians trapped in conflict zones or leading dangerous reconnaissance missions behind enemy lines, he always returned with every member of his team. His loyalty made him respected by his soldiers, but it also made him a threat to one powerful man. Colonel Richard Hayes was the commander of Ethan's brigade. To the public, Hayes appeared to be a decorated war hero. His office walls were covered with medals, framed photographs with government officials, and newspaper headlines praising his leadership. But behind the polished image was a man consumed by greed. For years, Hayes had secretly profited from illegal arms deals, selling military intelligence and equipment to criminal organizations operating across the border. Only a handful of trusted associates knew the truth. Ethan knew nothing about the corruption, until one routine mission changed everything. One evening, Ethan's unit received urgent orders. Intelligence had located an abandoned communications facility deep within a mountainous region occupied by hostile forces. According to headquarters, enemy commanders were using the facility to coordinate attacks on nearby villages. Ethan and his 6-member team were ordered to infiltrate the compound, recover any intelligence, and destroy the equipment before sunrise. The mission looked dangerous but manageable. As always, Ethan carefully studied satellite images, escape routes, and terrain maps. He noticed something unusual. The enemy presence seemed far larger than headquarters had reported. He contacted Colonel Hayes by secure radio. "Sir, the intelligence doesn't match the reconnaissance images. I recommend delaying until we verify the area." Hayes answered almost immediately. "Negative, Captain. The information is accurate. Complete your mission." Though uneasy, Ethan obeyed. A soldier followed orders. Under the cover of darkness, the team quietly crossed the border. Rain fell steadily, masking the sound of their footsteps. The mountains were steep, and thick fog reduced visibility to only a few meters. After several hours, they reached the communications facility. Something felt wrong. The compound appeared almost deserted. Too deserted. Ethan signaled his team to proceed cautiously. As 2 soldiers entered the main building, Ethan discovered stacks of sealed wooden crates hidden beneath camouflage nets. Curious, he pried one open. Inside were brand new military weapons. Not enemy weapons, they were identical to equipment used by Ethan's own army. Every crate carried official military markings. His heart sank. Someone from inside the military had been supplying weapons to hostile groups. Before he could inspect further, headlights suddenly flooded the compound. Dozens of armed enemy vehicles surrounded the area. Searchlights pierced the darkness. "It was a trap!" one soldier shouted. Gunfire erupted from every direction. Bullets shattered windows and tore through concrete walls. Ethan immediately ordered his team to take cover. Smoke grenades filled the air as explosions echoed through the mountains. The soldiers fought with courage, but they were badly outnumbered. Ethan radioed headquarters. "This is Captain Walker. We've been ambushed. We need immediate air support and extraction." Static. Then Colonel Hayes answered calmly. "Hold your position. Reinforcements are on the way." The team held the compound for nearly 40 minutes. Ammunition ran dangerously low. Still, no helicopters appeared. No reinforcements arrived. Ethan called again. "We can't hold much longer," Hayes replied with chilling words. "I'm sorry, Captain. Communication is breaking up." The transmission ended. At headquarters, Hayes quietly turned off the radio. He looked at one of his trusted officers. "No rescue team." The officer hesitated. "But sir, they're still alive." Hayes folded his arms. "Not for long." Back on the battlefield, Ethan finally understood. They had been betrayed. Someone wanted them dead. Determined to save his men, Ethan devised one final plan. "I'll draw them away," he said. "No, sir," Sergeant Mason protested. "You have families waiting for you," Ethan replied. "Go!" Ignoring their objections, Ethan sprinted into the open, firing at enemy vehicles. The attackers immediately shifted their attention toward him. The distraction worked. His surviving teammates escaped into the mountains. Ethan ran deeper into the forest, leading dozens of enemy soldiers away from the others. Gunfire echoed behind him. He was struck in the shoulder. Then another bullet grazed his side. Still, he kept running. Finally, a powerful explosion shook the mountainside. A mortar shell struck nearby, causing rocks and trees to collapse. The ground beneath Ethan gave way. He plunged into a steep ravine, crashing through branches before disappearing into the rushing river below. Enemy soldiers searched the area until dawn. They found blood, broken equipment, and pieces of Ethan's uniform, but no body. At military headquarters, Colonel Hayes filed his official report. Captain Ethan Walker and his team were overwhelmed during enemy engagement. Captain Walker was killed in action while heroically covering his men's retreat. The nation mourned the loss of a hero. Flags flew at half-staff. A memorial service was held. Ethan's parents received a folded national flag and a medal honoring their son's sacrifice. His teammates, believing he had died saving their lives, carried the weight of survivors' guilt. But hundreds of miles away, beneath the towering cliffs of an isolated mountain valley, an unconscious man lay tangled among broken branches beside a river. An elderly shepherd discovered him barely alive. A stranger had no identification, severe injuries, and only one whispered word before losing consciousness again. "Why?" The shepherd looked toward the mountains and quietly said, "Whoever tried to kill you believed you would never be found." He had no idea that saving this man's life would one day expose one of the greatest military conspiracies the country had ever seen. For 3 days, Captain Ethan Walker drifted in and out of consciousness. The elderly shepherd, Samuel, and his daughter, Grace, carried the wounded soldier into their small stone cottage hidden deep within the mountains. The nearest town was nearly 50 miles away, and there were no hospitals, only a retired village doctor who had spent years treating injured farmers and travelers. When the doctor examined Ethan, he shook his head. "He has lost a dangerous amount of blood. 2 bullets passed through his body and several bones are fractured. If he survives the next 48 hours, he'll have a chance." Samuel refused to give up. Day and night, the small family cared for the unconscious stranger. Grace changed his bandages while Samuel searched the forest for medicinal herbs the old doctor recommended. Weeks passed before Ethan finally opened his eyes. At first, he couldn't remember where he was. His body was weak, and every movement caused unbearable pain. As fragments of memory slowly returned, so did the horrifying truth. The mission, the hidden weapons, Colonel Richard Hayes, the betrayal. Ethan tried to stand but collapsed almost immediately. "You must rest," Samuel said gently. "They wanted me dead," Ethan whispered. Samuel nodded. "If that is true, then going back now would only finish what they started." Those words stayed with Ethan. Months passed as he slowly recovered. During his recovery, Samuel taught him how to survive in the harsh mountain wilderness. Ethan learned to hunt, build shelters, navigate difficult terrain, and remain unseen for days. Every sunrise reminded him of the soldiers he had left behind. He believed they deserved the truth. One afternoon, Grace brought him an old battery-powered radio that occasionally picked up news broadcasts. The announcer's voice froze Ethan in place. "Today marks the 3rd anniversary of Captain Ethan Walker's heroic sacrifice. His bravery continues to inspire the nation." Ethan lowered his head. The entire country believed he was dead. Colonel Hayes had not only abandoned him, but had buried the truth beneath a false story of heroism. Samuel noticed the anger growing inside him. "Revenge alone will destroy you," the old shepherd warned. Ethan looked toward the distant mountains. "I don't want revenge. I want justice." When his body had fully healed, Ethan secretly traveled to the nearest city under a different name. He avoided military checkpoints and public cameras whenever possible. The world had changed. Colonel Hayes had become one of the country's highest-ranking generals. Newspapers praised his leadership, politicians admired him, and television programs celebrated his military achievements. Meanwhile, Ethan's former teammates had all been transferred to different units. Finding them would not be easy. His first breakthrough came by chance. Late one evening, Ethan noticed a familiar face leaving a veterans center. It was Sergeant Mason, the same man Ethan had ordered to escape during the ambush. Ethan followed him quietly before finally calling his name. "Mason!" The sergeant turned around. For several seconds, neither man spoke. Mason's face turned pale. He stared as though he had seen a ghost. "Captain?" Tears filled his eyes. "It can't be." Ethan smiled faintly. "I guess the reports were wrong." Without another word, Mason embraced him. "I thought you were dead. They told us they searched for days." "They lied," Ethan replied. Inside Mason's apartment, Ethan explained everything. The hidden weapons, the missing rescue team, Hayes ending the radio communication, the deliberate betrayal. Mason listened in stunned silence. Then he stood and unlocked a small metal safe. Inside were copies of classified mission reports. "I never believed the official version," Mason admitted. "I secretly kept every document I could find." Together they compared the reports. Something immediately stood out. Several pages had been altered after the mission. Coordinates had changed. Radio transcripts were incomplete. Entire sections were missing. Someone had rewritten history. Over the following months, Ethan and Mason quietly contacted the remaining members of their old unit. One by one, each soldier agreed to help. None of them had forgotten that terrible night. Several admitted they had always suspected someone inside headquarters had betrayed them. One intelligence officer secretly provided satellite images from the original mission. The photographs clearly showed dozens of enemy vehicles gathering hours before Ethan's team arrived. Headquarters had known about the ambush in advance. Another former communications specialist recovered fragments of archived radio recordings. Using advanced audio restoration, they uncovered deleted portions of Ethan's desperate calls for help. The recordings captured Colonel Hayes refusing to authorize the rescue operation. It was devastating evidence. Still, Ethan knew it wasn't enough. He needed proof connecting Hayes to the illegal weapons. Then luck finally turned in his favor. One evening, a frightened logistics officer requested a private meeting. He had served under Hayes for years. "I can't stay silent anymore," the officer confessed. He handed Ethan a flash drive. "Every shipment, every payment, every fake report. I copied everything before they erased it." The files contained financial records, encrypted communications, transport schedules, secret bank transfers, and signed authorizations connecting General Hayes directly to international weapons smugglers. It was enough to destroy his entire empire. Mason looked at Ethan with disbelief. "We finally have him." Ethan stared at the evidence spread across the table. "No. We have the truth. There is a difference." The following morning, the Ministry of Defense announced preparations for the nation's largest military celebration, honoring distinguished generals for their service. General Richard Hayes would receive the country's highest military award before thousands of soldiers, government officials, and national television cameras. Mason smiled. Perfect timing. Ethan carefully closed the evidence folder. "For 3 years, he believed I was dead." He looked toward the sunrise. "Tomorrow, the man who buried me will come face to face with the soldier he left behind." The National Military Honors Ceremony was the most prestigious event of the year. Thousands of soldiers stood in perfect formation across the Grand Parade ground. Military bands played patriotic music, while fighter jets roared overhead, leaving trails of white smoke across the bright blue sky. Government ministers, foreign ambassadors, decorated veterans, and hundreds of journalists filled the grandstand. Television networks broadcast the ceremony live to millions of viewers across the country. At the center of it all stood General Richard Hayes. Dressed in a perfectly pressed ceremonial uniform covered with medals, Hayes smiled proudly as photographers captured every angle. To the nation, he was a fearless hero who had dedicated his life to protecting his country. Only Hayes knew the truth hidden behind the medals. As the master of ceremonies approached the podium, applause echoed through the stadium. "Ladies and gentlemen, today we honor one of our nation's finest military leaders. General Richard Hayes has served with distinction for more than 30 years. His courage and leadership have inspired generations of soldiers." The audience applauded once again. The president stepped forward, carrying the country's highest military decoration. General Hayes, it is my privilege to present. Suddenly, the giant video screens surrounding the stadium flickered. The ceremony stopped. The microphones crackled. Confused voices spread through the audience. What is happening? The screens turned black for a moment before displaying classified military documents. Mission maps, satellite photographs, radio communication logs. Then a familiar voice echoed across the silent stadium. This is Captain Ethan Walker. We've been ambushed. We need immediate air support. Every soldier looked toward the screens. Another voice followed. It was General Hayes. Hold your position. Reinforcements are on the way. Seconds later, another recording played. We can't hold much longer. Then came Hayes's chilling response. I'm sorry, Captain. Communication is breaking up. The audio ended. Gasps filled the stadium. General Hayes's confident smile disappeared. At that exact moment, the main entrance to the parade ground slowly opened. A lone soldier walked through. He wore a simple military uniform with no ceremonial decorations. His left shoulder carried the faded scar from the bullet that had nearly killed him years earlier. The entire stadium fell silent. General Hayes stared in disbelief. No, it can't be. The soldier continued walking toward the stage. Every camera focused on him. Veterans stood from their seats. Many recognized the face they believed had been buried 3 years earlier. The announcer whispered into his microphone, Captain Ethan Walker. The silence was broken by thunderous applause from soldiers who had served with Ethan. Many couldn't hold back their tears. Ethan stopped a few feet from the stage. He saluted the national flag before turning to face General Hayes. You left me to die. Hayes stepped backward. You have no proof. Without saying another word, Ethan handed a secure evidence case to the chief of military police. Inside were financial records, classified communications, satellite imagery, hidden bank accounts, shipment manifests, and the original mission reports. A military prosecutor opened the files while technicians projected every page onto the giant screens. One document showed Hayes authorizing the transport of military weapons to criminal groups. Another revealed millions of dollars transferred into secret offshore accounts. The restored radio recordings confirmed that Hayes had deliberately canceled Ethan's rescue mission. Then came the final piece of evidence. A confidential witness statement from the logistics officer described years of illegal arms trafficking ordered directly by Hayes. The prosecutor looked toward the president. Your Excellency, the evidence has been independently verified. There is sufficient proof to charge General Richard Hayes with treason, corruption, attempted murder, abuse of command, and illegal arms trafficking. Military police immediately surrounded Hayes. The once powerful general looked desperately toward the crowd. No, this is a misunderstanding. But nobody believed him anymore. His medals suddenly meant nothing. His reputation vanished in front of millions of viewers. As officers removed the insignia from his uniform, silence spread across the parade ground. The man celebrated as a national hero left the ceremony under arrest in handcuffs. The applause that followed wasn't for his downfall. It was for the return of the man who had survived impossible odds. Several weeks later, a special military tribunal found Richard Hayes guilty on every charge. He was sentenced to life imprisonment, stripped of all military honors, dismissed from service, and ordered to surrender every medal and title he had ever received. His illegal fortune was confiscated, and the money was redirected to military families, veterans' hospitals, and the families of soldiers who had lost their lives because of his corruption. The government officially cleared Ethan Walker's record. His original mission reports were restored. His name was entered into military history not as a fallen soldier, but as the officer whose courage exposed one of the greatest betrayals in the nation's armed forces. During a private ceremony attended by his parents, former teammates, Samuel, Grace, and the villagers who had saved his life, Ethan was awarded the nation's highest medal for extraordinary bravery. As the medal was placed around his neck, Ethan looked toward Samuel. If you hadn't found me that day, Samuel smiled, I didn't save a soldier. I saved the truth. Months later, Ethan retired from active military service. Instead of seeking fame or political power, he founded a leadership academy for young officers. There, he taught that true strength was measured not by medals or rank, but by honesty, loyalty, and the willingness to protect those under your command. At the entrance of the academy stood a simple stone memorial, engraved with words that every cadet read before entering. A real soldier never abandons the people who trust him. Courage wins battles, but integrity wins history. And so, the soldier they left behind became the man who ensured that no betrayal like his would ever be hidden again.